What's happening, gang? It's your boy Retro back again with another reaction video. Yeah. Today we got an update, and I feel like it's been a minute since we've had an update on the migrant crisis here in America. What's going on in New York City, to be specific. This one coming from Cash Jordan. I'm excited to check out what's going on here with the new tent shelters in New York. So we're gonna hop straight into it, guys. Make sure you guys hit that like button before we can get into it. Hit that like button, guys. Hit that like button for me. Also hit that subscribe button, guys, if you haven't already done so. We're on the road to the truth. Hop aboard for the journey. Let's get into it, y'all.
The opening of the new migrant shelter at Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn did not go as smoothly as some officials had hoped. Several migrant families that were bused to the facility refused to stay there. They got right back on the bus.
I don't think anyone expected that to happen.
Disappointment and frustration as migrant families turned around.
It's isolated. It's very reminiscent of sort of a prison.
This type of shelter up until now has only been used for single adults.
I think we also have to face reality, right? That there's only so much that we can do.
There are a total of 4 dormitories with communal bathrooms,
but bathrooms are still outside the main tents.
I do want people to know that we're out of space.
139,000 people have come to New York seeking asylum, many arriving by bus right here to the Port Authority bus terminal. And 65,000 are still in the city's care, living in shelters. And every week, thousands more continue arriving with no guarantees of a place to stay, even though the weather is taking a turn for the worst. And that's because the mayor says the city is out of good housing options. And asylum seekers who saw the city's newest shelter were so horrified when they arrived that they turned around, got back on the bus, and left. And some of those folks were families with children. One bus driver is quoted as saying, "We were shocked when they turned around and left." Shocked. But once you see what the people on the bus saw, you'll know exactly why they wanted to get back on.
Clearly, the situation is not ideal here. It's a transit desert. It is far from everything. It's not close to where parents have to take their kids to school. The bathrooms, the showers are outside. A long list of concerns. I could go on and on. But
I didn't know that the showers were outdoor showers. It is so cold in New York right now. That is a recipe for disaster. Showering in New York City during the wintertime outside, that's a scary thing to ask of a family with little kids. It's frightening, it's dangerous, and what's worse is that people are being told this is their only option if they want to stay in New York City. And the shelter in question here is a massive tent with rows and rows of beds inside. We're talking zero privacy. It kind of looks like a disaster relief center, but unfortunately, this is the only space the city says it has available.
less than an hour after the first batch of migrants arrived at Brooklyn's Floyd Bennett Field, families boarded the bus that took them there and went back to the Roosevelt Hotel Intake Center.
Think about this. You're on a bus from the southern border, you get off, and you come outside, and the first thing you see is the middle of New York City and the New York Times building right there. People are taking pictures. It's incredible. All the buildings, all the lights, all the activity. It feels like you're in the center of the universe, and you are. And the expectation is that if you come all the way here, this is going to be where you're living, in a place like this. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Floyd Bennett Field's an old airfield. It's not the center of New York.
Floyd Bennett Field was first proposed as a shelter site months ago. The former airfield space is owned by the federal government, but Governor Hochul is footing the $20 million bill.
So Floyd Bennett Field is essentially as far away from the arrival point and the processing point as you can possibly get. That's why it was so shocking for the people who showed up there. Floyd Bennett Field is in eastern Brooklyn, over an hour and a half from the center of the city. It's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. There's no subway transit. There is a bus, and that bus will take you to the subway. And since the people that are arriving here came by bus, they probably don't have a car or a driver's license, so they can't go anywhere unless that bus is there to take them places, and the bus is run by the city sometimes. And to many people, this latest emergency shelter totally defeats the purpose of coming to New York City in the first place. Because if you can't travel, it's going to be very hard to take advantage of any of the things that New York City offers.
This is not, best conditions, but we're managing crisis. And can I say to you better than we need help?
So it seems like everyone, including the mayor, agree that these are not the best conditions for people to live in during the winter, especially families with kids. Now, yes, this place is efficient. It's supposed to hold 2,000 people, but it's a decommissioned airfield owned by the federal government. And apparently it's susceptible to flooding. Plus, in order to open the site, the city wanted to approve it based on its own fire code, but there weren't enough working fire hydrants. And after months of delays, the federal government stepped in because it's federal property and opened the site in accordance with their own rules. Now look, nobody wants to be stuck and sequestered in the middle of nowhere. But there are so many people who've come to the city and need help that there's no more room to give everybody a spot in a hotel. And once you get off your bus at Floyd Bennett Field in the middle of nowhere, the exact opposite of Midtown Manhattan where you arrived, and you see that bus leave and you realize that you are stuck in that location, it's got to be the saddest, most stressful thing to realize that your autonomy, your ability to provide for yourself, to make your own decisions, is gone. This is literally all there is to look at. It's a big concrete slab. You see that little crib in there? This is one of the private areas for a family. And what's crazy is some families have to get back here to Midtown where their kids go to school. There's no school bus service. It's up to families to get themselves from this airfield an hour and a half away to the center of the city while relying on New York's unreliable subway and bus service. And on top of that, what if your English is still developing? What if you're a small kid and you're doing this in an unfamiliar environment? And what happens to families who decide to reject the shelter? What happens to them? Where do they go? To understand that, it's important to learn who the city decided would need to go to this new airfield shelter system and where those people were living before they were selected and sent. About this crisis, the worse it gets. This here is the Roosevelt Hotel. And as it turns out, some of the people sent over to Floyd Bennett Field had been living here in this building and had lost their ability to stay here. The city recently started limiting shelter stays for 30 days to single adults and 60 days to families with kids. And what's crazy is it's been about 60 days since school started, and families with kids in this facility, their kids were placed at schools that are within commuting distance of this location, not Floyd Bennett Field. And you see all of these illegal mopeds? These bikes are the only way people without work authorization are able to get a job and start doing something because they're rented from someone that has an Uber Eats account, and people pay a daily rate for both that and access to one of these bikes. And that means anyone who was in this facility and was relocated, to them the new reality of that airfield is shocking.
There is a bus. It takes families from the Floyd Bennett Field area to Stillwell Avenue in Coney Island, and then they have to take the train from there.
So I've got two little kids, one of whom is in school, and I cannot imagine changing up our entire morning routine because of a mid-school year move over an hour away. And not only is an hour and a half commute each way going to be really difficult, my daughter's 4 years old. She would have to be accompanied to school, and if I were a single parent with the other kid, this would just be so hard. I'd be getting up at 5:30 in the morning to get out of the house by 6:30 to get to school by 8 when it starts. And that's why so many folks are having a tough time with the new shelter arrangements. At best, you're a single adult, but you still can't work 'cause it's in the middle of nowhere, and you can't rent a moped and do anything. You're just there waiting.
Most of the families arriving on buses this afternoon chose not to stay, but the city says this is all it's got right now, and refusing it means foregoing any shelter from New York City.
Okay, so from the city's point of view, if they offer you shelter at Floyd Bennett Field and you say no, you are on your own, even if the bus brings you back here. At least this is what the New York Post says people at the shelter system have been reporting. One parent says, they told me that if I didn't take that address, they couldn't help us and we were going to have to stay on the streets or go to another city in the United States. And apparently, even though there aren't any available rooms at the Roosevelt Hotel, some of these families went back there and slept in the lobby. That's really tough. Now, according to the New York Post, people who reject the Floyd Bennett Field shelter can still go back if they change their mind. But apparently word is also traveling very quickly among the shelter system that that facility is going to be really tough and people should try to avoid it if they can. Now, the city does have a reticketing program set up to fly people to other parts of the world, and that could be an option for somebody who doesn't want to try and tough it out in the shelter system. The tickets are free, they're voluntary, but since the city's only option right now is a tent in an airfield, I think it's probably a smart decision. Because at least then, folks who are told they can't stay at a hotel and their only option is to leave the city, at least they won't be stuck out in the cold. And I read somewhere that it costs $10,000 a month to help somebody live in a shelter. Airline tickets probably cheaper and safer than trying to stay on the streets.
Wow, right now I feel like this is a very sticky situation. I feel like of course you don't want to be a beggar and then be a chooser at the same time, but then again, it seems like they're putting them so out of the way. I don't know, man. Let's hear the rest of it.
Reality is that there just aren't enough resources in New York City to help everyone who's here any longer. And at first, when people came here, there weren't limits on the amount of time you could stay in the shelter, and the shelter wasn't a tent in an airfield somewhere. People traveled months expecting one thing, and now things are different, and it's freezing out.
Nobody has done more for asylum seekers, for immigrants, for migrants than the city of New York. I think we also have to face reality, right? That there's only so much that we can do.
It's almost like when people started this journey, there was this bright glimmer of hope at the end of it. A better education, food, shelter, healthcare, and opportunities to work and earn a living. But now that they're here, it's not 100% true for everybody. Getting a job here takes time because you've got to apply for federal work authorization. And for some reason, it's not something that everyone has been able to do. And honestly, even if you get a job, in 2023, New York City is not an easy place to be. New York has one of the highest costs of living in the entire country. And if someone comes here and English isn't their first language and they're lacking the kinds of skills that are of high demand right now in New York, it's going to be really tough to meet a $5,600 a month rental price for an average apartment here. Plus, inflation is real, which means food and basic necessities cost more now than they used to. On top of that, companies are cutting their hiring because the economy isn't what it used to be. It's tough for everyone right now. Make $100,000 a year, your salary gives you $36,000 of spending power after your rent and your basic costs of living. And that means that even people working in fancy offices are not having an easy go of it here. And it's hard to think of how some of the folks who've recently arrived, some of whom are single parents, are going to be able to afford to just exist at all in New York. Yes, there's a ton of opportunity here, but that doesn't mean it's easy to get, especially when the city's in court right now trying to amend right to shelter rules. And whether you agree with how the city's handling this or not, New York has spent quite a bit. This is estimated to cost the city $12 billion over the next 2 years. That's $6 billion a year. Now, regarding the right to shelter rules, the city doesn't want to get rid of them completely. They just want the courts to agree that maybe right to shelter doesn't apply in extenuating situations, like what the city is going through at present. And the city's proponents point out that the right to shelter rules, which go back to 1981, aren't some new set of political rules. They go back to 1981 when a court mandated that the city had to provide temporary shelter for anyone who asked. But so far, the city and the mayor have been applying the right to shelter rules to everyone. And what's also interesting is that New York City is alone in its right to shelter rules. There's no other city in this state that has the same rules. That's why the crisis is happening here, and it's not happening in other parts of New York like the upstate area. And that's why the governor has been unwilling to use all of the state's resources and space to help New York City with this. And believe it or not, municipalities outside of the city sued to block New York from arranging deals with private hotels to use those as shelter once they knew they were going to run out of room.
Yo, there we have it, guys. Coming from my guy, Cash Jordan. Definitely going to leave the original video link down in the description box below. For those of you who want to check that out, also go show my guy, Cash Jordan, some love. For coming at us with this update on the migrant crisis. Like I said earlier, I hadn't seen an update since they were housed in the hotels. I remember seeing the conditions that they were leaving the hotels in. You know, some of the foundations were becoming unstable in the hotels because of the amount of pressure, weight. It was too many, it was above capacity. It just seemed like a bad situation. It seemed like a recipe for disaster. Initially, when I first saw it, I was like, well, how are we going to sustain this? This is sustainable. Like, what's going to, how are we going to, incorporate them into society? How are we going to get them going? They have to kind of get the wheels turned in order for this to actually work. And it seemed like off the rip when I first had seen it, it seemed like a lot of the migrants didn't really have a plan. Like Cash had said, they came here seeking, better education, a good source of income, and better housing. But they've got none of it because it's so tough to get here in America. It's actually, kind of sad to see because, we're in a very tough times ourselves right now underneath Joe Biden. I feel like it's really tough being an American. If, like you said, a working New Yorker making $100,000 a year only brings home 36,000 after paying, his bills. That is very tough to see. That's That's why a lot of people don't live in New York City, because of how expensive it is. And for you to be, I couldn't imagine being, completely new to a foreign country, moving with almost $0. A lot of them came over with no money at all, and then being placed in one of the most expensive cities in the country, and asked to begin trying to live a normal life, enrolling my kids in school, trying to find a get a work visa or try to get a job, and try to lead a normal life, and then not to mention saving up enough money to be able to move out on your own and get like your own apartment, house, whatever you're gonna get. It just seemed like it was undoable, almost impossible from the beginning. I feel like a lot of these people were set up to really like believe that they could turn it over and start living a new life. And it sounded like some of them were figuring it out, whether that be legal or illegal. I've seen them have those mopeds without the license plates. And they were somehow getting access to people's DoorDash accounts, which I feel like is a very nifty trait. You know what I mean? If you can get DoorDash and start sending meals here and there, you could definitely make a quick buck and start saving up. But those camps really eliminated all of that for the migrants who had been trying to live or start a normal life. Because how are we going to provide for our families, keep our kids in school, on a daily basis from an hour away from everything? It looked like it was over an hour and a half commute. And the buses, he said, runs sometimes. You have to key in on what he said. Cash Jordan said the buses run sometimes. And it's not all the time. It's not guaranteed, which also concerns me. Like, you're telling me you're dumping me an hour away on an airfield. That thing looked pretty sketchy. I'm not gonna lie. That looks like one of those places that they take you out when they're interrogating you, and you've done some heinous crime. You're like mass terrorist, and they're like, we need the bomb codes from you. We need the codes from you, and they take you there. That's what that looked like to me. I'm not even, I want to say, beggars can't be choosers. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, it's the best place you can go. I mean, if this is all they're offering, but still at the same time, where do you go from there? The people who did accept that, where do you go from there? How do I start, trying to lead a normal life from that airfield? Excuse me. I just don't see how, that's sustainable either. I feel like you're just housing me at that point. You're just storing me there. Am I supposed to live there for the rest of my life? Secluded, kind of alienated from all of, because that was more so on the outskirts. I know a lot of the New Yorkers, the New York City residents were very upset to see that they were being housed in the heart of New York off the, or from the beginning. I feel like initially a lot of them, like they said, were housed in hotels spread about through downtown, close to the Big Apple in the center of the city, which is why a lot of New York residents, shop owners, were very upset, because a lot of the shops and their homes and stuff like that, that usually would be tourists, bringing in revenue, and building the economy in New York. But now it's migrants who aren't, they weren't spending any money. They were taking from these stores at first. It sounded like things got a little better. They got a little bit more acclimated with how to, work and get money in order to, spend on things that they need. But at first, it was just a problem. They were running rampant, stealing from these shop owners, tearing down, and doing whatever they wanted to do. They were getting drunk on the streets. I was seeing a lot of the first. I don't know if you guys seen that first video that I checked out. But this was definitely a great update to see what's going on. I'm not sure exactly what I would do here, because it seems like a hands tied situation from both standpoints. You can't continue to take advantage of these hotel owners and house all these migrants in their hotels. They're like running it to the ground. Um, but at the same time, these migrants don't want to you know stop, drop, and roll their whole life that they've built. I mean, granted, it's only been a couple months, but still, they rebuilt a whole new life. They're trying to actually do something for themselves, and now you're trying to push them out to the very outskirts of the city where they won't be able to really do anything. It was already tough to get a job. Now it's impossible. Yo, definitely hop in the comment section, guys. I want to see your guys' thoughts on what's going on. What would you guys do in this situation? What do you think is the next best step? I just don't know about the whole airspace tent thing. I don't know how sustainable that is. I mean, yes, it's good if you need a couple nights to stay, but as far as the long term and the longevity of it, I just don't see it being sustainable. Definitely let me know your thoughts. Also, make sure you guys smash that like button, guys. It don't cost a thing. Hit that like button for your boy. Also hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to the truth. hop aboard for the journey. I'll catch you guys on the next one. We go.